Hi, everyone, and welcome to the newest episode of 2030 Vision AI and the Future of Law. I'm your co host, Jen Leonard, founder of Creative Lawyers, here as always with the brilliant Bridget McCormack, president and CEO of the American Arbitration Association. On every episode, we try our best to keep up with the rapid pace of change in the land of AI and draw connections for lawyers who are practicing all day, judges who are overseeing their dockets and may not have the time to keep pace with AI developments and think about what those developments mean in the legal profession. Hi, Bridget. It's great to see you.
Hi, Jen. It's great to see you too. I liked it in person better, but I'll take this for today.
I know, I know. This is subpar, but we will ride again in person, I
Oh
think,
yeah.
very soon. So excited about that. And just to preview for people who haven't listened, we break this into a couple of different segments. We both start. I think it's useful to share ways that we're using this general purpose technology so people can get a sense of its breadth and all the different weird things you could do with it. So we each start with an AI aha, something we've used the technology for that is delightful or interesting. And then we used to have a section on definitions related to AI because there's all sorts of weird jargon that goes along with learning about artificial intelligence. But we thought we might actually swap that out for a new segment we're calling What Just Happened? Because so much just happened every single time we jump on a recording, and we don't always have time to go over it. So we'll do a very, very quick survey of some things that just happened. And then we'll dive into the main topic. And today, we're going to be exploring what generative AI means for the opportunities and the expansion of the ability to file suits in courts and have rights adjudicated as a result of this technology. So, with all of that as background, Bridget, I'm so curious to hear about your AI aha this week.
I don't know if my AI aha this week will break any new ground for anyone, but it's been really something I've come back to a number of times. I've been trying to think about being better at communicating with stakeholder audiences, legal audiences for the most part, but also people involved in the alternative dispute resolution processes that the AAA administers about what the technology means and kind of what's coming. And I think it's really hard for lots of reasons that you and I talk about. People are kind of in different places about what they understand, how much they're using it. Um, but it's also the case that as you'll see from our next segment, the technology is moving so quickly. It's really hard for anybody with a busy job to keep up. And it's also the case that if you're not, I think, working with it full time and following it full time, it's hard to trust it. It feels pretty weird when you just like see how it works, and it's hard to trust it. And I do think there are some examples throughout history about when we've gone through some significant changes, and what it took to get people to trust what was the new normal. And I was reading an essay this week. I sent it to you like I always do, and I'm sorry for all of my texting of things. This article about the first engineer who developed the first horseless carriage, and he developed it in the shape of a horse. So it was a carriage without a horse, shaped like a horse. And of course, I went right to all of my generative AI friends and asked for drawings of it. And I have some great ones that I've shared with you, and I think they're amazing. I said, "Draw for me or show me a picture of a horseless carriage, that's shaped like a horse," and it's pretty cool to see it. And the point was, so people could get comfortable with this new way of transportation, where a horse wasn't gonna be pulling their carriage anymore, an actual horse. This was, like, shortly after Einstein famously said, "The horse is doomed as a means of transportation," which is so funny. But the horseless carriage gave people an opportunity to kind of get used to, like, try on for size, like what this was going to feel like, and you could actually like steer the carriage with reins, like that were attached to the fake horse's head, and so I've been trying to think about like what is the horseless horse shaped carriage for what we're doing right now, because that's the metaphor that I feel like I have to be thinking about as I'm communicating to people. Like we're headed somewhere that's going to be really different. You and I've said many times, I think it's a big brighter future for so many reasons. I think I'm excited about it, but I understand why it's all so scary. And so, what are the ways that I can make audiences, stakeholders, partners, people whose opinions I really care about and I want along for the ride and like the design of what comes next? How can I like transport them in a horseless carriage shaped like a horse? So that's the question that I posed to my chatbot friends, like to help me with a communication project, and thinking across like stakeholders in legal, and what are like the priorities of the different stakeholders, where might they be most you know, fearful or worried, or, what are the things they're most concerned about, and how can I think about tailoring, my message and what I'm talking about to all those different audiences. And it's been great. I mean, obviously you're like a wonderful thought partner to me for like how to talk to different audiences. You're my favorite thought partner. But you're not always available to me. You have this family that you seem to like you're sticking with
I
them.
had told them that they are problematic in this regard. They seem unconcerned.
And so having this, like, back and forth, and I'm creating, in GPT, I'm creating Canvas documents, and so, and saving and, like, iterating with, like, the different messaging and seeing how it feels for me, what's the best way for me to do this, it's just been, like, a great thought partner, again, on something that really is fundamental to what I do every day, and so it's great to have, like, a 24/7 thought partner. Like, I have random thoughts sometimes, and I can go right back into my conversation, and it incorporates it. And so the full-time thought partner is my AI aha moment this week.
What what is the horseless carriage? Like, I mean, in imagining now that you're describing that, I'm picturing, like, mannequins of your thought partners who are generative AI, but
Yeah.
what are the horseless carriages for lawyers and judges, do you think?
So I think that it's really important to remind lawyers and judges how much of what they do as humans is critical um to to their work. I mean, yes, there are things that the technology can already do now much faster and with, less with fewer mistakes. I mean, that we know what those things are. But there are other things it absolutely cannot do and are more important than anything else. There's this like robust literature about procedural fairness in courts, and it goes like I'm gonna butcher it by making it like really succinct, but um, people are willing to take bad outcomes in court, if they feel like they, were treated with respect, treated with dignity. If somebody looked them in the eye and explained why, they lost, and explained what was gonna happen next and why. And they're really willing to accept bad news when that happens. And, like, the human part of that is the most important part of that. Like, whatever the legal question was that led to the loss, that's probably something that's, humans also are important in, but, other tools will be able to help humans with that part of it. And then there's the other boring parts about, like, writing it up and filing it and blah, 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 all the boring parts. And to be able to really lean into human parts is gonna be, so good for their clients, for their users, for our communities. And so I think like, emphasizing how important the human parts are is the horseless carriage shaped like a horse, I think.
No, I think that's right. I mean, it seems to me to be both persuasive to lawyers and judges who are uncomfortable with the technology, but also, like, the thing that gets people excited who've been persuaded,
Yeah.
that they've used it and they still feel like they've add value as a human, uh,
Yes.
because of the things that it can't do as well as we can.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and your stories remind me of, there's a video I used to show in my design thinking class, from ILS, Institute for the Advancement of the American Legal System, and I know you're on the board at ILS, and it was a design thinking activity for self-represented litigants who just completed, their own divorce hearing, and so they've gone through this very difficult emotional and legal process by themselves, and I was always struck by the fact that a couple of the interviewees would say, I'm just so grateful that you asked me about my experience, and it made me also very sad that like, that just asking them felt like such a big change to what they were used to. But to your point, I think, or relatedly, they didn't have a great experience in most cases because it's very difficult to do that, but just reaching out and asking them how it was made them feel better about the process itself.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and I think we could do a million times better, but
Yeah, and I mean, that's the example I always go to, the example of, people who can't afford lawyers, like, and how important it is to translate, complicated, stressful processes to them. That's usually where my brain starts, but it's also true at the, completely opposite end of the market where, your strategic partnership with a client that has hard decisions to make is going to be like your, highest human value. And I'm not saying that you can't have a thought partner in your AI, you probably can, but evaluating like the real life implications of a bunch of different, possible strategies is going to be something that humans are going to be doing with other humans, right? And they're going to be able to talk to each other about what's scary about, this path versus that path. And so I think that's the horseless carriage shaped like a horse. This is good for humans. It's really good for humans.
and also as you're talking, and I'm putting you on the spot here, but you texted me this morning, I think, about another cool study in the medical context. Did you want to share about that?
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's like the latest one, right? I feel like I think that was it radiology or was it mammography radiology that the generative AI, was far superior to the humans alone and the humans using generative AI, right? Which is similar to what we saw in the JAMA study. And therefore, like, I guess not surprising. And there was a little bit of back and forth about that result, between a number, I don't know them, but like a number of doctors saying that at this point it's kind of malpractice not to use it, when
Yeah.
you have findings like that. I mean, I just as a consumer of healthcare, I'm kind of excited about it because I get why humans can make mistakes, and I understand that that happens because I am a human. But having that assist for the kinds of things that the technology will do better will make it much easier for your doctor then to have the human conversation with you about what your options are. Like once we know what we're dealing with, right? It's I think the same thing in a way or similar, analogous. Yeah.
That's exactly what I was thinking when you talked about strategic partnership is, the detection piece, it's awesome. I mean, the statistics that are coming out, the one that you sent me is a 30% higher rate of detecting breast cancer and mammograms. That's amazing. I mean,
Yeah.
30%. But then to your point, that doesn't mean that the whole thing is over. I mean, then you need a human doctor to help you navigate what is a really difficult situation and help you strategize and plan. And the
Yeah.
same lawyers do.
And I don't know. I mean, I am a WebMD. I'm a very talented WebMD, but I don't end up counseling very many patients. But I could imagine like the confidence I'd have if I like already knew that I had the right answer on the diagnosis. And so I could move right to like what they're dealing with emotionally, what the choices are. I think it would give me a lot of confidence in my future patient interactions. So I'll let you know how it goes. All right. How about you? You must have had some AI aha moments this week. Which one are we going to hear about?
So I always have the most elementary examples. Yours are always cool and creative, and this week is no exception to that. But it also incorporates one of our vocabulary lessons a little bit. So there's a concept of RLHF, which is reinforcement learning from human feedback, where humans provide the correction and refinement and alignment to outputs from AI to make it stronger and fine tune it. So I was thinking, sort of like already reversed the paradigm. I'm working on a book project right now. And for part of the book, I'm really trying to self educate around change leadership frameworks and the literature in change management. And so I have all these books that I'm reading. And at the end of every chapter now, I'm going into ChatGPT and asking it to create a quiz for me to reinforce my own learning. And the reason I think it's interesting is I did this maybe a year and a half ago with another book that I was reading, and it might have been Innovator's Dilemma, actually. And it was not actually that great. Like some of the quiz questions were confusing or wrong, but not this time. I mean, I can say, give me 10 questions from chapter 2 of change management, and it knows, like, what chapter 2 is, what the questions are. It gives me true and false and multiple choice, and if I ask it to switch it up, it will. And I do feel like just that 10-minute intervention helps me understand in a way that I wouldn't on my own. And I get excited about the educational applications of Gen AI. And, like, I just think about people who are not in formal educational programs being able to help themselves learn better, which I thought was very cool. So it was like reinforcement learning from AI feedback, RLAIF.
Is it I mean, I think you told me once that your kids are not using it at school. Is it something that you could imagine, like, building I don't know, if one of your I don't have kids at home anymore, but if one of your kids got interested in something and, it's not something that the school has a curriculum around, can you imagine building a tool like that for your daughter or your son, about a topic they were interested in? Yeah.
Totally, I mean, because I'm at that stage, they're 8 and 9, so 2nd and 4th grade, and I'm at the stage where I can't do their math anymore, but I mean, the kindergarten was my max. The instructions that come home are sort of like, at night, spend time with your student working through their math problems, but they learn math in a totally different way that I don't understand, really. Uh, but I can imagine working with them with a chatbot in reinforcing their learning. The challenge I think we've talked about before, and I don't think we talked about this on the podcast, is, like, figuring out how to not have them use it as a crutch
Yeah.
and just so, my son and I were talking about this when they were doing their Revolutionary War unit, and he was the loyalist, which I would have problems with. But in the car, I asked ChatGPT voice mode to describe the arguments the loyalists would have, around the Intolerance Act, and he like or it, like, basically summarized it in a way that a 9-year-old would understand, and my son's response was like, "Could you play that again so I could write that down for class?" And then I realized, like, okay, it has to be in conjunction with the parent, but definitely I could see that, and I could see it in professional education, like, all levels of education, real I think Sal Khan is doing work
Yeah.
around too.
I think he's doing really interesting work, with it, which is really exciting for I think the reasons you say, like, for places where, people don't have access to formal education, it could be a game changer, which will be
Totally.
good for, the future, good for innovation, good for
Yeah.
all of us. Yeah.
Okay, so what just happened?
Mm, a lot, a
A
lot.
whole lot just happened. So we identified 4 things that have happened in the last 2 weeks, and we're gonna do, like, a super quick survey of what those are and then use future episodes to dig into them a little bit more and what they might mean for legal, but maybe, Bridget, you could kick us off with Stargate, which sounds like a very cool movie. What is
Yeah.
Stargate?
I think Stargate was announced right, after or maybe right before you and I recorded in Philadelphia. It was like so that 2 weeks ago feels like forever ago, given everything that happened after that, but it was a joint venture between OpenAI, SoftBank, and Oracle, that is aiming to invest up to $500 billion in AI, infrastructure. So, apparently they've already broken ground. It's actually a project that they've been working on for some time, but it was announced from the White House with the president, and the president was, I guess, endorsing it or excited about it. It's not a joint venture with the government in any way. There's not government money involved in it, but I think that the optics of announcing it from the White House with the president's, kind of support and endorsement was symbolically important. And there was a little bit of like back and forth between OpenAI and some of their competitors or one of their competitors on social media after the fact. But it's about whether it's really the money's really there. But it seems like there's an awful lot of money already committed and pretty good confidence that they're going to be able to raise the rest to build this like enormous infrastructure project for future AI projects. Did I miss anything, or is that about right?
No, that's my understanding. I mean, I thought it was sort of amusing that it really has nothing to do with the government, but it is, as you said, the optics are that the United States is taking seriously its investment in infrastructure for artificial intelligence supremacy, I guess, and
Yeah,
prominence.
Yeah, which was interesting because 2 days later, I think, we started hearing about DeepSeek, which I think everybody's probably heard about now. I mean, if you look at any newspapers at all, you know something about DeepSeek, but what's DeepSeek, Jen?
So DeepSeek, and I can't remember the timing, but I think I read in one of the articles about this that it actually might have been disclosed like the day of the announcement at the White House, but didn't pick up press coverage until Thursday of that week.
Yeah.
Um, but, commentators are saying that this was very intentionally, released or announced, because of the arms race between the US and China around developing artificial intelligence. So DeepSeek, is a Chinese AI company that was established really as a research organization. So they were not consumer facing. So unlike the American tech giants, we're not trying to productize a lot of these things. Um, but they were just focused on advancing AI. And interestingly, or uniquely, I guess, to the US companies other than Meta, they use open source technology, meaning that they offer the underlying source code to the general public. So unlike a ChatGPT where you and I could not get access to the algorithms and the underlying weights and things like that, this is an open source model. And so DeepSeek, this company, released a model called DeepSeek R1. And on benchmark tests, it seems to perform really in comparable ways to the leading US models, including OpenAI's GPT-4. But reportedly, it costs just a fraction of the cost that American AI companies are investing, with many fewer GPU chips than the US companies are purchasing. And you could sort of see that reflected in the stock markets. NVIDIA stock, and NVIDIA, of course, is the chip maker that provides all these GPUs. I think it fell by 17% on the news of DeepSeek's emergence. And so it just roiled the markets. It really seemed to catch the American tech CEOs off guard, although all of them came out and said this was amazing and they're legit invigorated, about the new competition. But to me, I've listened to all the commentary. A lot of it is confusing about the numbers and what really happened. But to me, the biggest takeaway is sort of like this really could democratize AI development, and it could change the narrative as to whether we really can only place faith in these huge tech companies to develop AI, which I think is exciting because we'll see some competition, and we'll see a lot of startup activity. And so that was my takeaway from DeepSeek. But what did you think about it? Anything I missed here?
Yeah, no, I think that's the story. I mean, to just put a finer point on what it might mean for the expanding the market of like who has access to build with the technology is how many people built their own models based on the DeepSeek open weights or open source model that was made available on Thursday. Hugging Face, which is a shared online space where people can share research and things they're building with generative AI, reported that by Tuesday, so just 4 days later, there were 600 new models built with DeepSeek's technology. And then the other thing that in addition to it, there's a lot of debate about whether they really did do it for a lot less money, and like I don't know what to think about all that. It sounds like it's at least a little more. There's a little more to it than we first heard, right? But they certainly found a different and more efficient way to train the model. And I mean, I didn't really understand it until a video I watched yesterday, which I sent to you. You might not have had time to watch it yet, but it actually it did a great job of explaining. It sort of cut out like two of the big training segments that the American companies have all used by a pretty innovative like engineering. It's not a trick, but technique that allowed them to kind of bypass like two big stages that the American companies have used. And if that's right, it just means I feel like it just means everything's going to accelerate even more than it already has. So it's definitely interesting. It's definitely going to change, I think, the market a little bit, and that's exciting. So
Yeah. Yeah, and we've listened to commentators too that sort of hypothesize that this could mean that the huge big tech companies that everybody's fawning over and giving all this money to might ultimately not enjoy the revenue streams that they think, and the gains will be distributed across consumers and across startup communities, which I just find kind of amusing. Given the last 2 years have all been about waiting for these same few players to announce and tell us what the future will be.
Yeah.
Uh, so super interesting. One thing I did not know, and we haven't talked about this, so I forgive me for asking this, but Meta in the US is the only major tech company that also offered open source AI, and also has fairly cutting edge models. So I wasn't sure why DeepSeek's emergence was so different from Llama's emergence, where people could build on top of its open weights. Have you heard any conversation about that?
So I mean, well, no, not really. I mean, the one thing I think that I might understand about that is goes back to what I just explained, which is like that this engineering shortcut that DeepSeek made. Um, they're both open source. They're both therefore available for developers to use. And I think Zuckerberg has a strategy about that and has had a strategy about that, which he thinks is now vindicated because of how DeepSeek has like taken the world by storm. I don't know if any of that's true, but even though they're both open weights, DeepSeek still has done this, like, innovation in the engineering, that that, um, that creates, I think, a better platform for lots of other innovators to use, so I think it might be a more attractive one. I don't know why now everybody else can't do that because they published a paper, their paper explains what it is they did. Not that I can understand the paper, but there's a guy on video who will explain it to you, so there's a shortcut. And ChatGPT can explain it to you. But I think that's maybe the difference. But Zuckerberg does think that his strategy was vindicated as a result of what's happened with DeepSeek. And interestingly, I think Meta is the only one of those companies that has not taken a hit in the last week or so. So maybe he's right. I don't know. I don't know how to tell how all that works. Yeah.
I guess we'll find out.
Yeah.
But I thought the whole thing was very, very interesting, and the timing was super interesting, especially given Stargate. And so we've got the announcement from the White House, then we have the emergence of a Chinese competitor, and then we have OpenAI responding in the same week, I believe, with let's see, deep research first, which we'll cover. So tell us about deep research, Bridget.
Yeah, so deep research is OpenAI's model that's somewhat like Google's deep research, which you and I have talked about, and you and I are both fans of. I like the Google Deep Research product is one I use quite a bit when I need a primer on something that I just need enough background information to kind of start thinking about what I want to do about something. It's a great tool. And OpenAI built its own that I have not tried. I don't have access to it. You need either a pro subscription, which is the $200 a month subscription, or I'm told eventually enterprise customers, which we are at the AAA, we are going to get access to it in a few weeks. So I think I'm going to hold out for the enterprise access. Although reading today some of how Ethan Malik has used it and how excited he is about it, I'm like tempted to just get a $200 a month subscription for now, because it does sound like quite a tool. The difference between, or I don't know because I haven't used it, but according to Ethan Malik, OpenAI's deep research tool sort of does a deeper dive and finds its way around problems when it's doing research for you on a research project in a way that Google's doesn't. I think he compared it. He said the Google product is like an undergrad doing a research paper, and the OpenAI deep research product is like a PhD student doing a research paper, which is a pretty incredible tool to have at your fingertips because again it does take it's not going to give you like an immediate answer. It can take anywhere from 5 to 30 minutes, they say. Maybe it could take longer if it's a really hard question, but to be able to have a PhD level memo on a question within 30 minutes is, I mean, it's like a stunning game changer for anybody who needs research for what they do, which I think is most of us, right? Like there's always like something you need a little research on, right? Um, so I again, when I get access to it, I'll come talk about it again. but it definitely seems like a big deal. I don't know if have you read any other reactions to it?
I mean, I've mainly been following Ethan's posts about it, and he's posting other academics' posts about it. I think he had one this afternoon from a fellow academic who had generated in an hour a paper that, I mean, disclosed that he used this tool, but generated a paper that was then published in a peer-reviewed magazine. I'm not sure how quickly you could get peer review done, but maybe it was AI driven peer review. But yeah, I mean, if you just think about again, like to the democratization point and why I think we're both very optimistic about the use of these tools. If I were to sit here in my house and try to find a PhD level student to help me with a problem or a project or get a thought out into the world, the many friction points between me and being able to do that are enough that I would not do that. The idea that you could put in a prompt and 5 minutes later have a response at a PhD level, and then, as I understand it, interact with I'm sorry, with deep research operators next. Deep research and have it push your own thinking in a way that's a little different from the Google product, which is like a very nice summary and portfolio. I think that's mind-blowing, and I think we'll talk about this in a future episode, but this is what people hire lawyers to do, is
Yeah.
deep research and analysis, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. I think it's gonna be very impactful for lawyers. Again, another helpful tool so you can focus on those the horseless carriage shaped like a horse. So, all right, one more what just happened. OpenAI also released Operator. And what's Operator? What have you had a chance to do you have access to Operator? Not
no,
yet.
I don't ha
No.
do you?
No, I think it's the same. They claim that we'll get it in the enterprise, version, but we don't yet.
No, I mainly have followed this through our friends on the Hard Fork podcast who are hilarious, so I listened to their review of it. Um, but, we've talked before about agentism and the idea that you could give an AI a task and it could go independently perform actions to achieve that task. And when we do presentations together, or separately, I always talk to lawyers about, imagine not just generating an itinerary for your vacation, but then having the AI book the restaurants, book the airfare, all of these different things that you would then have to do. And Operator is OpenAI's, I think, sort of first attempt at real AI agentism, where you can ask it to perform tasks on the web and it will autonomously perform those tasks by interacting with different websites. Now, it launches a browser within your browser. So I think it's fairly secure, and they have discrete partnerships with companies like Instacart and DoorDash and Etsy and StubHub. So there are limited use cases. But basically, as I understand it, you would ask, buy me tickets to the Super Bowl and go Eagles, by the way. But it would open up an internal browser and go on StubHub and go through the process of finding you tickets. And it would ask you to confirm before it does any significant action. So if you're like me and you searched for Super Bowl tickets and found out it would cost $36,000 for your whole family to go, thankfully, it would ask you before purchasing those and that I would decline. And then it would handle information that is sensitive by stopping and asking you to take over. And it refuses certain higher stakes tasks like financial transactions or sending emails. Um, I have not seen this. I haven't seen a lot of demos, but the hard fork guys tried it out. And the one thing that made me laugh about their trial was they tried to use Instacart to order groceries, but the address defaulted to OpenAI's servers, which were in Des Moines, I think, or
Yeah.
somewhere in Iowa.
Or maybe Instacart servers or something, but it was Des Moines, yeah. And
Yeah,
so it
oh,
was
Instacart, that's right, that's
yeah,
right, it was in Des Moines, so they were imagining, like, all these pallets of milk being delivered on somebody's
yeah,
front porch in Des Moines. So, like, very, very limited, but it kind of makes me think of, the movie The Net with Sandra Bullock, when you watch that movie
yeah,
now and she's ordering a pizza on her computer and it looks so clunky, and I remember seeing that movie and being like, "That's amazing that you would ever be able to order a pizza on your computer," but also, like, that's never gonna happen, and now I could order a pizza from anywhere, from my phone, from my watch. So I thought it was interesting and definitely previews, some things to come, I think, right?
yeah, for sure. I mean, I think I keep hearing that, like, vertical agents is what investors are interested in, and legal tech entrepreneurs are focused on, and so it'll be kind of interesting to see. And I think that the news from the DeepSeek news makes all of those like even more promising. So we'll see. It'll be interesting. Yeah.
So our main topic for today, that was almost a full episode just on what just happened. So we'll keep doing that because things keep happening and we'll want to know what they just were. So next time we'll do some more what just happened and then maybe a deeper dive into one of those areas. But today, Bridget, I really wanted to sort of do a mini interview with you as the former Chief Justice of the Michigan Supreme Court, somebody who has put a lot of thought and action into expanding access to court services to individuals, and talk about what opportunities generative AI creates for filings in courts and for people to ask to have their disputes handled in court. So maybe we could start by sort of asking what it is about generative AI that could lead to more lawsuits and why you think that's a good thing.
Yeah. I mean, you're putting words in my mouth. I think not the ability for more people with non-frivolous lawsuits to be able to get relief for those wrongs is a good thing. I think the more disputes, valid disputes that we can resolve, leads to uh, stronger communities, more confidence in the rule of law. So I'm in favor of any way we can figure out how to resolve disputes that need to be resolved, and there are many right now that don't get resolved. And this is actually something I did think a lot about in many different contexts. But one that always bothered me, and I tried a couple things to try and penetrate it, was personal injury cases where there was no dispute about liability. So, really, just kind of a concession around liability. But if damages were under a certain dollar amount, um, there was really no market for lawyers to bring those claims. And they're too complicated for people to bring on their own. It's really, they're the filing requirements and the process requirements for filing a civil lawsuit, even a civil lawsuit, that's where you're only alleging $50,000 worth of damages, and only I say just for the purpose of this discussion. Obviously, $50,000 for a lot of people might be the difference between like staying in your home or not, or you know, sending your kids to school or feeding your family. So it's a significant amount of money to many, many Americans, and yet um, the market for legal services right now has no place for those cases to go. It just isn't. There isn't a way for lawyers who file cases on behalf of people who've been harmed, individuals, small businesses, frankly, there are, business torts. But lawyers can't file those cases because the cost of litigation makes it impossible to make the bottom line make sense. And I heard that repeatedly from the lawyers who do that. There's this one innovation in maybe it's in other states as well, but I know it pretty well in South Carolina of all places. They have this innovation called summary jury trials, and basically the plaintiff's bar and the defense bar agreed that they should have a way to resolve those cases that just like don't make any sense to litigate in a formal court process, because by the time you get through the discovery, there's no money left for the person who was injured or harmed, and even the lawyer is like out, on both sides. Like it's just costing everybody too much money to get to a result. So they have this process called summary jury trials, and they're basically it's a private process that the bar has agreed to. They use a courtroom and they use the jury pool that's been called to the court, but they have a one-day trial. They have, like, a limit on, like, the number of minutes the plaintiff can use and the number of minutes the defendant can use. They have a high-low agreement at the beginning of the case. Like, it's like, this case is either worth 25 grand or 75 grand, and the jury is really only deciding between those 2 numbers. They have, like, a lawyer who plays a judge, wears a robe, like, and they have this, like, basically, summary jury trial process, and, the people involved get to have their day in court. They get to, like, tell their story, say what happened to them, And the jury makes a decision. The jury. I mean, they're not really a jury, but they're kind of a jury, and it works incredibly well. And it works because there's like basically just like smart lawyers decided to solve a problem, and they did. I actually, my husband actually wrote up like an academic paper about it once. He like went down and like watched them for like a month and wrote. It's like a very cool paper that he wrote about it. I tried that in Michigan, like, it never took off. I felt like the lawyers on both sides, like, felt like something was up, and they couldn't trust it. I kept thinking, like, "Well, how about medium claims courts?" Like, what how about if we just needed, like, other ways to resolve this, like, category of cases for which the market couldn't respond. And I think now we might have it. And I think this technology is reducing the barrier to resolution in such a significant way that it's making that category of cases, at least, all of a sudden, have a place to go. I mean, at least, there might still be problems if significantly more cases get filed in courts, and we could talk about that in a minute. But I do think that the barrier to entry, that like startup cost that makes it impossible for lawyers to file a case where nobody disputes that somebody was harmed and somebody's at fault, but the injury is only worth, and I put only in quotes because obviously it's significant to the person who was harmed, $75,000 or $50,000 or $25,000. So I think that's kind of exciting, that part.
Very cool. I represented my parents pro bono once in a case like this for $15,000, which to them was an enormous sum of money, but to your point, they had been wronged by an insurance company, and nobody's gonna take that case. They were lucky to
No.
have an in-house counsel who loves them very much and was willing to, but it was like full-blown discovery, going to the
Yeah.
courthouse, having hearings and stuff, and we prevailed, but that is a very unique circumstance, and you add that together in the aggregate. So you've talked about personal injury claims, business torts, some insurance disputes. Are there other categories of cases that fall into this
Yeah,
s
I mean,
window?
honestly, I mean, I probably haven't thought about them all, but I think it's any civil wrong, right? Like any civil wrong where damages are, under a certain dollar amount. I think those cases are just all priced out of the market. I hadn't thought about your example. Like every once in a while, you have a kid who loves you, or you're a lawyer, so you can go figure out how to navigate the process, and it's worth it to you. But for the most part, there is not a way for even lawyers who would like to help to make that model make sense, given the costs of litigation the way it is now. So,
Yeah. And it's a story for another day, but even as a lawyer, it was an incredibly difficult process trying to figure out how to litigate in a county where I didn't litigate. I mean, it just
yeah,
goes to show you how difficult it is no matter what your training is.
yeah,
Um, But it's funny because we take an optimistic view on this podcast, but I drifted into old lawyerly tendencies in prepping for this podcast, and all of the notes that I had were about the dangers of frivolous lawsuits, and that's
yeah,
what I was thinking about. And as we were prepping, you said this is what you hear about most frequently. And we'll put deep fakes to the side because I know that there are concerns out there about that. But why do you think that the automatic jump for lawyers and judges to this is gonna open up the floodgates to everybody suing one another is misplaced?
yeah. I do hear this from when sometimes when I present to courts, or at least for a while. I mean, I think that the conversation is significantly elevated this year than it was maybe last year or the year before. But there is this worry of like, oh gosh, are we going to just see like thousands and thousands of frivolous lawsuits because these like chatbots can like spit them out, and they'll just automatically file them. And I usually can make most courts feel better because their tech infrastructure is like so low grade that they're like the automatic filing from a chatbot is a far way off. And sadly, even for like innovative like court leaders, when public funding is how you staff your IT team, it's going to be a while, right, before they can sort of take thousands and thousands of filings from bots. I mean, I think these tools are already like pretty good, and you definitely could tell it, I guess, to draft. You'd have to know what to tell it to draft, but you could probably tell it to like draft a demand and maybe a complaint if you knew that word. Maybe you could ask it to teach you what you would need to do if you wanted to sue somebody, and probably you could do that, and then you could probably tell it to draft that thing. But then figuring out how to file it is, like, almost impossible. I mean, it's just really, like, it's really probably, not it probably shouldn't be in, like, the top 30 things we're worrying about, and instead, I think we should be focused on the idea that maybe we can figure out how to resolve these disputes that nobody really disagrees need to be resolved when there is again, if there's a dispute about whether someone's liable, well, then that's a different category of cases, and obviously we should figure out how to resolve those disputes as well. But for the cases where, everybody kind of agrees about, who was at fault, but nobody can afford to figure out how to get that harm resolved, this should be good news, right? Because the fact that our legal system can't respond to that right now is causes damage. I mean, it's damaging when you try to explain to someone that even though they were harmed and nobody disputes they were harmed and nobody disputes who was at fault for them being harmed, we don't have a market that can help them because it's not a you weren't harmed enough because $50,000 of injury isn't like injury the legal system cares about. It's not a great message, right? So I think if we have a way to resolve disputes that are lower dollar disputes but significant to the people who are harmed, that's probably good news. And there are, as you know, now there's like legal tech companies, startups, and actually companies that have been around a little bit longer, but are using this technology now in their business model that are aiming at this sort of segment of the market. So I think we're already seeing some solutions here.
And you have a few examples of those. What are some of the companies that are emerging to tackle this?
Yeah, I've seen, like, more stories in the last month or so on, and I know there are more than these 2, but I've seen, like, 3 or 4 different stories about Even Up on the plaintiff side and Legal Nation on the defense side. And full disclosure, I know the team at Legal Nation, and have and they're very impressive. The Even Up team has raised a considerable amount of, funding, in the last few months. They're doing basically that front end work that a plaintiff's lawyer has to do to get a case ready to figure out if it's a case they can file, meaning a case where they believe that they can prove someone was liable for harm and that the harm is enough to make the case financially make sense. And there's a lot of like startup work, gathering documents, tracking down the kind of information that a lawyer needs to make that sort of valuation and decision about whether they can make the case make sense. And and Even Up's platform is doing all of that, and it's then putting together these demand packages, and it's giving attorneys who do that work this like brand new tool to kind of assess case values, figure out how to, which cases they can, put in which process, and they're able to file significantly more cases. I mean, the Even Up reports like settling or collectively claiming more than $1.5 billion in damages for the law firms using their platform, which is significant given that I think they've only been doing this generative AI piece of this work for not too long. So that's pretty interesting. And on Legal Nation is one of again, I'm sure there are others like Even Up on the plaintiff side. So we don't endorse particular companies or whatever, but Legal Nation is one that's been working to they've been using technology long before, not long before, but for a number of years before generative AI to sort of enhance efficiency in litigation generally. I don't know that they only work with defense firms or corporations. I think they work with anybody, frankly, because I think their technology does that. But they now leverage AI to automate a lot of aspects of litigation as well. And so I've seen a number of articles, both Even Up and Legal Nation, talked about. So I think this is a segment of the market that this technology is going to change, and I, for one, think that's mostly good news. I as you know, one of the things I think about all the time, and I'm like constantly trying to figure out solutions for, is I do think we need more effective operating systems now. If these, maybe the parties will be able to actually like work things out, and they won't need courts, and they won't need arbitrators or mediators. But when they do, I do want our operating systems to catch up to the new tools for the buyers and sellers of legal services.
Very cool. And it connects all the way back to our What Just Happened segment of the acceleration and democratization of this technology and all the different cool ways that it can be developed by entrepreneurial minds. And also seems like, I was thinking about this in another conversation, connecting statutory remedies that the legislature creates with like an actual market where people can take advantage of those remedies or assert their rights.
Yeah,
Right now, the legislature creates remedies and there's nobody who will actually help you execute on them.
right.
Um, so it's a little bit, removed from the average person sort of connection between those two, but it feels to me like it improves the functioning of different branches of government together as well. Or
I
could.
think yeah, there's big upside potential there, honestly. And I do, I've seen recently that the frontier companies are now building products for governments. Did you see that? Like OpenAI had a big announcement about it,
Yeah, I
and
saw that.
yeah, somebody else did as well. A couple of them have had announcements that they're investing in building products for governments, and that's very exciting because I was a little worried that all of the activity in the market would be aimed at the people who can pay the most for the new shiny tools, and that's
Same.
not usually your local, state, or federal government, frankly. But in a lot of ways, if if governments get access to these resources, I think they can really provide better service to the people they serve. So that's exciting.
Very cool. Well, thank you for course correcting me on my risk spotting, issue spotting, lawyerly brain around frivolous lawsuits. And we hope everybody out there enjoyed this optimistic imagination of what a future could be where people have better access to places that can resolve their rights and responsibilities more efficiently. And we hope you will join us on our next edition of 2030 Vision, AI, and the Future of Law. Who knows what will have happened by then? And thanks to everybody out there for listening, and we'll see you soon and be well. Thank you for tuning in to 2030 Vision, AI, and the Future of Law. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to our podcast and leave a review. Stay informed and inspired as we continue to explore the AI-driven future of the legal profession. We'll see you next time.